Senator from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I rise to speak on a couple of topics. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank really an icon in our state, and that is West Virginia State Senate pro tempore Donna Boley. She's a good friend of mine, but she is now in her 10th term. She is the longest continuously serving member in our state's state Senate. At one point in history, Donna Boley was the only Republican. She was the ranking member on every single committee, and the lead Republican, as she was the only one in the early 90s. But I want to thank her for her service to our state, which began in 1985, and wish her all the best as she presides over today. She's presiding today over the West Virginia State Senate. So, Donna, way to go. Really proud of you. You're a role model for every woman who's watching, and certainly young girls as well. So, Mr. President, I also rise to join my colleagues to discuss the Democrats' so-called COVID-19 relief package. Prior to this past round, Congress had been delivering much-needed relief, as you know, 5 times since the beginning of this pandemic with bipartisan support. And in this last month, my Republican colleagues and I put forth a targeted proposal presented to President Biden in the Oval Office. He invited 10 of us over, and we had a great discussion. It wasn't just a plan, but it was a plan to work together, to be united and move forward on an area that we've had great bipartisan consensus. Let's be clear, we don't disagree on the need for continued relief and resources, but it needs to be done in a targeted way. Throwing money randomly will not fix it, especially when some of these funds that are still being spent that we speak of right now that haven't been spent yet. And taking the opportunity to spend on favorite projects is not the intention of COVID relief package. In December of 2020, that wasn't that long ago, 2 months ago, we passed the most recent recovery effort, which amounted to approximately $900 billion in relief funds. President Biden's relief plan takes none of that into consideration. They don't take into full account the sufficient understanding the impacts of that bill from just 2 months ago have yet to be felt. Instead, it force feeds funds and radical policy ideas into a framework under the guise of COVID relief. Let's just take our schools, for example. Everybody's frustrated because our schools aren't open and our schools are not fully, and our students are falling behind. Congress last year appropriated $68 billion for K through 12 schools. But of this amount, only $5 billion of that, $5 billion of the 68 has been spent so far. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, of the almost $129 billion for K through 12 schools included in this Biden COVID relief plan, only $6.4 billion of that is planned to be distributed through September of this year. The remaining $122 billion will not go to schools until the fiscal years 2022 through 2028. Now, we're being sold this program because it's an emergency. Well, I don't know how you predict an emergency in the year 2028. This cannot possibly qualify as emergency spending. Here are some of the other areas where funds have yet to be spent. Of the $13 billion provided in our December plan for our agriculture community, only $11.5 billion, $11.5 billion of the $13 billion has yet to be obligated. That's not even spent, that's obligated. Roughly $14 billion in appropriated funding for COVID testing has not yet been obligated, and that is an extremely important part, and that's less than 10% of this plan are things like testing, vaccines, therapeutics. 21 states have actually experienced revenue growth compared to 2019-2020, yet this bill expends $350 billion to states. This money needs to be targeted. The parameters created in this category alone reward states that were more restrictive in their economic decisions and heavily weighted towards highly populated states. That's not my state. That's not my friend here from Montana. That's not his state. and the parameters of this are so loose that I can't imagine what projects will be dreamed up to be spent on. And as of January 19th, none of the $27 billion provided by the Department of Transportation in December, 2 months ago, under the Consolidated Appropriations Act has been obligated. Yet there's more money in there for this as well. Also important to note is that the President plan includes many provisions that really have nothing to do with COVID relief. Nothing. But this is a COVID relief package. So, from an $86 billion bailout of union pensions to $100 million, over $100 million actually, for a subway project in California, to funds provided to advance portions of President Biden's recent climate executive order and environmental justice priorities. These are some of the items in here that have nothing to do with coronavirus relief. These extra wish list items make his plan more expensive and more partisan. To make matters worse, my friends on the other side of the aisle have decided to do this in the most partisan way possible, reconciliation. Using this process risks wasting millions of dollars without the standard procedures that we go through on the appropriations committees and other committees. This bill hasn't even touched a committee over here in the Senate. But it goes without the standard policy guardrails and provisions that when we work together, we ensure that the money is put to its intended use. We're creating slush funds in the name of COVID relief. Bottom line, this will be a fiscally wasteful product. There's good things in here that we all agreed on, that the 10 of us went to the White House to talk about, and many of us have provided in the last 5 bills. Many Americans will be getting checks. And while I agree with this, all of this would be better in a bill that we agreed on and that we negotiated. We are risking a potential economic recovery with continued massive spending. And as I've said time and time again in my 5-minute speech and all over the state of West Virginia, we all agree on continued COVID relief. However, we need to do this in a targeted, fiscally responsible, and working together like we have the last 5 times. Doing so allows us to effectively help individuals, families, and businesses that need help the most, and there are many out there that do, and they need it yesterday, we know that, while also considering what other impacts might be happening as we throw over $1 trillion extra dollars to unrelated COVID relief items. So with that, I'm in opposition to the bill, in case you couldn't tell. And I see my friend from Montana's here, but I want to thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.